You ready, Deputy Burke? Thank you all for joining us to the Community Engagement Audit Steering Committee. I want to thank the city for reaching out to us. Today, we will hear about a progress report on how we are doing with the independent assessment. And I think on our agenda, we have a call to order. Courtney, could you please help us?
Yes, I would be happy to. I would like to start with you, Chair Sherwood.
Here.
Excellent, thank you. Anne Marie Banfield does not appear to be with us just yet. Deputy Chief Burke.
I'm here.
Thank you. Ashley Hamilton also does not appear to be with us just yet. And then Kathleen, Jonathan.
Hi, yes, I'm here.
Thank you so much. And Casey Kopcho.
Present.
Thank you. And Cindy, it's not going to happen for me again.
Lena Sar here.
Thank you. Thank you. And Scotty.
Here.
Thank you. And Oni.
Here.
Thank you. So that's everyone that we expect from the committee members. And then we have staff who can, do you want self-introductions of staff? That might be interesting.
That'd be great.
So everybody knows I'm Courtney Knox-Bush and I work in the city manager's office. Gretchen, could you do you?
Hi, Gretchen, city manager's office as well. And I'm wondering, I'm worried we missed Levy unless I was spacing out.
Oh, did I skip Levy? I'm sorry, Levy.
Hi, everyone.
Let me make my font bigger.
I'm here.
Thank you. There. And then Hillary, would you like to do a self-introduction?
Yes, my name is Hillary Holman-Kidd. I'm the management analyst for the Salem Police Department.
Thank you. And Deb, could you?
Yes, Debbie Aguilar with Salem Police Department.
And then Chief Womack.
Hi, everybody. Trevor Womack.
Thank you. Chair Sherwood, back to you.
Thank you, Courtney. And thank you, team. Thanks for gathering on short notice. I know that we're all interested in hearing the update, so I appreciate you being here today. We have one order of business left from our previous work, and that's approval of our minutes from April 29th. Have folks had a chance to read those? We could also put on the end of the agenda, give you a chance to glance at those, or entertain a motion to approve those minutes. Anyone need extra time? Anyone like to move to, or I can move to approve the minutes from April 29th of 2021, if we have a second?
I'll second.
Great. And I thought that was Casey for a second. And then all those in favor, you could raise your hand or say your name or help with the roll there.
Would anyone like to register an abstention or a nay vote on the minutes? Excellent. So I'll just count that as unanimous for next time. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And so Chief, I'll turn it over to you and your team for a progress update.
Excellent. Thank you, Jody. Hello, everyone. It's good to see everyone again. Today, I asked to have this meeting just because I wanted to make sure that we communicate fairly regularly on how we're doing. And so, be forewarned, we're not coming here today to provide some sort of full, implementation of all the findings. That's not what this is about. It's really about providing an update. It's only been a couple months of work internally on our strategic plan. But we've gotten some of that initial work done now. And so I was hoping to preview that with the group to show how we're working towards incorporating all of the findings and recommendations from the assessment into our strategic plan for the department. And then also be able to get some initial reactions and some thoughts and some feedback. So that's just primarily the purpose of today's meeting. I don't think necessarily we have to go for 2 hours tonight with the information we have. So hopefully people won't be upset about maybe ending before the schedule. But again, we wanted to make sure, and I wanted to express to you how much I value the effort and work that you put into this along the way. And I want to make sure we stay engaged so that you know that we're taking it seriously and we are trying to actively follow up on all of those findings and recommendations. So with that, I asked Lieutenant Debbie Aguilar to walk us through the update today. Now, Lieutenant Aguilar, I think most of you know who she is and familiar from along the way in the assessment, but what she's doing now for me is on a temporary assignment as Chief of Staff. So she's kind of removed from her normal duties so that she could work more closely with me on some of this work around the strategic plan and some other things that we're implementing within the department. And so I asked her today if she could do the update or the overview of where we are. So Debbie.
All right, I'm hopefully going to share my screen. And hopefully, okay, perfect. Whew, okay, first hurdle done. Okay, whoops, yes. So thank you. So yeah, so how we're going to go over this is I have a few slides that I want to talk to you about just as a reminder of kind of where we are when the assessment was started and what the assessors were looking at when they were conducting their assessment or audit. And then I'm going to talk a lot about how we worked that into our beginning of our strategic plan. So a lot of this presentation is going to be about our strategic plan, because really that's how we're going to take those recommendations that were given to us by the assessment and then incorporate that into our organization. So just as a reminder, these are probably not unfamiliar to you, that when the auditors or the assessors were hired, they looked at our department basing it on these particular questions. So they really were looking at our policies and our procedures and our tactics, and were they aligned with what the community expects and what City Council expects. They were really looking a lot at our capacity for community policing and engagement with the community, and then engaging, how do we engage with all residents in our community and all community members, including youth and BIPOC community, those who are suffering from addictions and those populations as well. And then also looking at our policies, our procedures, our tactics, our training, and looking at that from a lens of, is there any bias or discrimination attached to those? And then finally, our accountability piece. So how do we hold our officers accountable? What are our policies and procedures related to that accountability piece? So those were really the guiding questions that the assessors used. So when they finished with their assessment, they identified 11 key areas that they had specific recommendations that they were able to provide us on. And when you look at the 11 key areas, you see that the assessment was really comprehensive. They didn't just look at the few areas that are identified in those guiding questions. They really looked at us holistically. So they drilled into these 11 key areas, and then they, out of that, identified 6 key findings. With those 11 key areas and those key findings, they provided us those recommendations just based on their analysis. From those recommendations, so some of the recommendations were very broad, and some of the recommendations were more specific. So in that, in those recommendations provided to us, we started to develop this framework of a strategic plan. So the strategic plan, the whole goal is to use that framework to take those recommendations and, like I said, build them into our organization. So strategic plan. So we began developing the strategic plan in about June of this year. We really had a aggressive timeline. So our goal was to have the strategic plan laid out, have the goals, have the objectives, have our metrics, and have it finalized by January of next year. So it's pretty aggressive, but we're actually proud to say that I think we're actually on time or a little bit ahead of our timeline. We did hire a consultant to help us, and with the consultant's help, we divided the work of the strategic plan into 7 phases, and I'm going to talk about that here in just a moment. And he's key in helping us divide up the work and divided it into smaller pieces that are manageable, but also he's the one that keeps us on task to make sure that we're keeping up with the schedule. So the bulk of the work for the strategic plan is completed by this core internal work group. So our consultant is Matt Jones. We've worked with him before. He's local. I think he's based up in the Portland, Vancouver area. Chief Womack, of course, is part of the core group, Hillary, and then myself. So we're the ones, like I said, who are doing, creating a lot of the draft wording and the draft recommendations. And then we created a more broad internal work group who can take those recommendations and draft recommendations that we create and then provide their input, as well as reach out to the rest of the department members, both sworn and professional, to get their feedback as well. So the internal work group is made up of both sworn and non-sworn and both supervisory staff. So we have 3 sergeants who are first line supervisors. We have 4 police officers, so sworn police officers. And then we also included our professional staff as well, since many of these recommendations are also include the professional side of our police department. So like I said, it's developed, or it's divided up into several different phases. So the first phase is just began in June, and it was simply just to decide who our work groups are going to be, plan an initial meeting, figure out who's going to be doing the work and how that workflow is going to happen. So that was completed fairly quickly. And then we moved into the second phase, which includes looking at our mission, vision, and values and refreshing it. So our mission, vision, and values were last updated about 8 years ago under Chief Moore. And the mission, vision, values, there was nothing wrong with what we had. However, mission, vision, and values really should be a living thing that changes and is updated along with how and when a department grows. And then also, because we had a change of leadership and Chief Womack is now here, our mission, vision, and values is really a reflection of what he expects the department to have, like what his expectation of us as our mission statement, what he expects us to have as values, and where he wants to see our department be in 3 to 4 years through a vision statement. So, and that actually an updated mission, vision, values was one of the more specific recommendations from the assessment team. So we worked on that. We actually, Hillary will go over that. We actually have our mission, vision, and values, the updated versions here to show you. And then July, August, our timeline is where we're supposed to be, is develop our overarching goals. And actually, I'm happy to say that we are slightly ahead of the curve because we do have our goals, draft goals already created. And those goals really create the framework for the strategic plan. So if you think of them as sort of like buckets of work, so they're very broad, and those goals can then be used to identify where our objectives best fall into those buckets of work. And so they, again, develop our overarching priorities. So the overarching goals and the mission and vision and values, it was really important for us to get feedback. So like I said, we have that broader internal group who is tasked with not only providing their input to the draft mission, vision, values, the draft goals that our group creates, but then their job is to go out and provide presentations and provide a mechanism for officers and professional staff to provide their feedback back, so we can then incorporate that into hopefully what will be the final document. So collecting and incorporating that feedback on not only the mission, vision, values, and the overarching goals has been something that we've been working on for the past few months. So coming up in September and October, where we should be is developing our objectives and then our metrics and how we decide whether we're successful in meeting those objectives. And actually, this is where we're a little bit ahead because we do have, we're starting to work on what our objectives will be underneath those overarching goals. This is part of the phase where we are going to be incorporating many of those recommendations, both the broad recommendations and the specific recommendations from the assessment. You're going to see them under the objectives, and Hillary is going to share one of the goals and some potential objectives under that goal. And you'll see there a lot of the recommendations from the audit will be highlighted in there. Of course, feedback is always very important. So that's something that we're going to be continually gathering from both internal and external stakeholders. And then, of course, it's important that once we develop our goals and our objectives that we, sorry, my light just went off. Hope you can still see me. Once we finalize those, it's really important that we develop some kind of metric to figure out whether those objectives that we've set out, are we meeting them, or do we still have more work to do? So part of this, developing this strategic plan, will be figuring out what those metrics are going to be. How are we going to measure ourselves? How are we going to gauge whether we're making progress in those objectives? So towards the, hopefully beginning and middle end of October will be community outreach and feedback. So like we talked about before, where we want to get input from both internal as well as external stakeholders. This is where we're going to have a process such as presentations, community surveys, try to figure out as many ways as possible to get that information out to the community and then get their feedback on what we've created. The end of November, or November, hopefully beginning November, end of November, is refining the plan, making sure that what we have is something that we're happy with, that it meets what we and the community need, and then also taking that feedback, both internal and external, and how we can incorporate that into our final plan. And then most importantly, it's looking at what objectives do we have and how can we best meet those objectives given the resources we have now, or what resources do we potentially need to ask for so that we can be successful in this objective. So for example, if we have an objective that's related to community engagement, do we have the resources that we need currently to meet that objective, or do we need to ask for different types of resources, or do we need to realign the resources that we have now to be successful in that objective? And then project assignment. So who's going to take on all this work? It can't be just us. It can't be just the chief and me and Hillary. So we're going to have to figure out who's going to take on these projects. And then December, hopefully final draft, do full presentations to not only our internal organization, but city council and other stakeholders, and then have it finalized. And again, like I said, the goal is that January 2022, we have the plan finalized and we're ready to get started. So I'll pass it on to Hillary, and then Hillary, just let me know when you want me to fast forward or move it, and I will.
Thank you. Yeah, so as Lieutenant Aguilar said, we the first thing we needed to do was revise our mission, vision, and values. And the process for that was that the three of us sat down and brainstormed. And then we went out to the broader internal group. And then we went out and we created mechanisms via paper forms and electronic anonymous feedback for the entire department to give us their input. And we took that into consideration. The chief took that into consideration and really incorporated a lot of that feedback. So if you're not familiar with the previous mission statement, this is very close to what the previous mission statement was. But our new revised mission statement is provide superior service to keep Salem safe while enhancing trust. The big part of that was added is the enhancing trust. That came out in the assessment. So it was important to add that. We retained superior service. That was important to the department. We learned that was important to the department to retain that. For the vision, the new vision is to be a model for 21st century policing using effective, innovative, community-informed approaches toward improved safety. And we really wanted to emphasize smart policing, principled policing, and this is where we hope to be at the end of this strategic plan in 3 to 4 years. You can advance now. Thanks. And the values are very similar. We retained honor, integrity, and compassion. We added collaboration because that is something that was important to the chief to express that we're going to be a partner in the community with our community, our citizens, but also businesses, universities. We're going to be a collaborative part of finding solutions in the community. We took out service because it's mentioned in the mission statement, and we just thought that we didn't need to mention it again as a value. Go ahead, Deb. All right, so the next part is defining our overarching goals. And so these are the categories that our objectives will fall under. And so the 3 overarching goals that we defined are safety, legitimacy, and excellence. And we did not intentionally do this, but that is the airport code. So if it's an easy way for our officers to remember, those are our overarching goals. Okay, go ahead. Yeah. So I wanted to put this in to show you how we're taking the assessment, and we are cross-referencing the recommendations. We have an Excel spreadsheet with several tabs based on their key findings, and we're categorizing them as to where they're going to go in our strategic plan. Are they going to go under safety, excellence, legitimacy? Are they going to be mentioned in an objective? So I just wanted to demonstrate that we really are looking at these recommendations. Go ahead. Yep. So right now where we're at is we're currently working on defining the objectives for the safety goal. And these are just draft. This is literally what we're working on at the moment. So, this is where we're going to go out to the broader internal group and want feedback from them on these things. And then, of course, we haven't gotten to the metrics yet. But we're just wanting to show you an example of how the process that we're using. So under safety, we wanted one of our objectives to be employee safety and wellness. And one of the ideas is to potentially create a wellness coordinator position for the department. It's become very evident to us that officer wellness is a priority for our officers, for each other, and for the chief. And so we really wanted to incorporate that and emphasize that as an objective. Go ahead. Yeah. Next is building analytical capacity, which we are currently doing. But we also wanted to call it out clearly in the strategic plan. So you can read some of these points under the objective for building analytical capacity. The numbers in parentheses just let us know where they're referenced in that big Excel spreadsheet. So these are pulling directly from the recommendations from the assessment. So we're going to build the department's criminal intelligence capabilities. We're going to ensure our technology gathers detailed information. We're going to use that information to support our decision making. And then we're going to gather community input on concerns and activities. And go ahead, Deb. I think there's more on the next slide. Yeah. So we're going to create a robust centralized crime analysis unit. And then we're going to assess the department's technological capabilities and make sure they're up to date with current practices. So we would develop metrics for these objectives eventually. Go ahead, Deb. Another safety objective is traffic safety, and that includes pedestrian, bicycle, vehicle. We're seeing a lot of pedestrian accidents this year. We want to be a part of the solution for any kind of traffic safety incident. Go ahead. Risk reduction strategies. So again, emphasizing a smarter policing pillar. We're going to work on enhancing community livability. So again, that incorporates the collaboration part of our values. We're going to be a partner in assisting and addressing livability issues such as addiction, homelessness, mental and behavioral health needs in the community. And we also want to identify, formalize, and enhance partnerships that we might very informally have with people, but we want to make sure we formalize those partnerships. Crime prevention and reduction. So, how can we reach out to the community and provide crime prevention before there becomes an actual, enforcement issue? So just some thoughts that we had: increase educational outreach, utilizing our current resources to engage citizens in crime prevention. We're going to do outreach efforts and make them accessible in multiple formats, to reach the Spanish language community, the Russian language community, ASL. We want to look at it from a DEI lens and make sure we're able to reach more than just, primary communities. Crime prevention and reduction continued. Okay, create content that can be accessible asynchronously. So if somebody can't make it to an in-person class, how can we reach them? And then also as part of that education, we're going to address content related to violent crime and child abuse, and also provide more information on what resources are available out there for those experiencing maybe domestic violence situations. So throughout this whole strategic planning process, we're going to get community input. And one of the examples from most recently was we utilized National Night Out. And what we did was we created postcards with QR codes that people could just scan on their phone and give us feedback, just general feedback. What are we doing well? What could we improve on? Here's broad categories on what we're thinking we want to include in the strategic plan. Does that align with what you would want included in the strategic plan? We probably had about 100 postcards distributed, and we got about 20 responses, but we did review them, and we value that input from the community, and we're going to continue to do things like that throughout this process. So just lastly, just quickly touch on the budget. We were lucky enough this year, for this current fiscal year, to be granted one lieutenant position, which would be over a future community engagement section. The budget committee surprised us and recommended a body worn camera program, which we very much appreciate. And so along with that comes for support staff. And we also were able to get one admin analyst who is going to be replace a sworn position who's currently doing the fleet and accreditation management, and we're going to move that sworn position back into patrol. And this new admin analyst will be taking over those duties. And then we got some funding to support our strategic plan, our consultant and things like that. So so that's where we're at. And I think that's the end of our presentation. So we'd be happy to take any questions, comments, feedback.
Sure, quickly, thank you, Debbie and Hillary. So you heard, again, a lot of this is draft, and we want to make sure we're explaining our process that we're going through so we get some feedback on that. And we kind of overviewed safety, the first safety goal tonight. That's just draft information. We literally started working on that just this past week. And so when I say safety, safety means different things to different people. And so we want to make sure we're including different perspectives as we build those goals out. So to some folks, safety means crime reduction. To some folks, safety means feeling safe in your neighborhood and being able to go to the park with your kids, right? I mean, so there's different meanings of safety and how to approach it. And we want to make sure we're incorporating all that under that goal. And also internal, that's why we put employee safety and wellness on there. So the safety of our officers too. So it's such a broad overarching goal. We want to make sure we capture everything that should be and needs to be under those goals. I did want to touch base on when we talk about the analytical capacity, for example. Again, that's just initial draft thoughts there, but it was directly from the assessment. We're trying to make sure we incorporate everything from the audit. When we build out analytical capacity, the first bullet, I think, talked about building criminal intelligence, and it's much bigger than that. But I want to make sure that we're clear here that when we get to the next goal, which is legitimacy, right? We're talking, that's much more about trust building, relationships, how we interact with our community. So sometimes when you hear things about us building out a more robust crime analysis or intelligence unit, I don't want folks to be thinking about kind of old school putting cops on dots type of CompStat model. That's really not what we're talking about here. We want that data. We want to be able to analyze that data and make decisions with it. But we're going to always balance that against all of our goals and objectives under legitimacy as well. So that's what I've talked about from the beginning, this philosophy of making smart decisions, data-driven decisions, and evidence-based approaches, effective policing strategies, but at the same time, using kind of a DEI lens and a trust-building lens, a relationship with our community lens, so that the work that we are doing always benefits our community in both ways. Right? We don't want to damage our relationship with the community while we're trying to reduce crime, for example. So I just wanted to put that in perspective, that we talked about safety a little bit tonight, but we haven't even got into the legitimacy goal yet, which is just as important, and it's going to have just as much information in there. But with that, we really are interested in hearing a little bit of feedback about, are we on the right track with the process? It is a bit of an aggressive timeline. And then other thoughts on how we can get more community input within that kind of aggressive timeline. We are going to be establishing in September, our goal is to have more information available on the website, including more access for community surveys. And then I would ask you all to help push that out and gather more feedback once we have that ready. So that's coming too. But I'd be curious to hear some thoughts and some feedback based on what you heard tonight.
Well, thank you, Chief, and thank you to the staff for helping us understand a little bit more. Understanding this is in a draft early form, thank you again for bringing it to us so that we could have that chance to provide some impact early on. I have a couple of points, but I want to go around the room and look at other members and see where your comments are at. So I think I saw Casey, maybe? No.
Well, I'll defer to others first, if I may.
Others?
If everyone defers and is polite, no one will speak.
We'll just wait. No.
And don't hold back. I want some honest feedback.
Well, I'll start. I think this is definitely good work that you've been doing. So I thank you for getting started on that. Since we know that this is something that was needed, that's really good that the staff has been moving on this. And while this is work that needs to happen internally, I think there's also the need for it to be connected to make sure that there's council, city council involvement into this work, so that there's a connection to that. And so that's one question that I have. How will this be connected to some of the priorities that the council has to make sure that they are involved, that they're not surprised about the final outcome, and in a larger, stepping back and looking at the bigger picture, at which point in the process do you think that there will be a broader community engagement on what the community of Salem wants and understands in terms of community policing, so that is reflected back by everything that's been done internally?
I can take a quick stab at those now. I do think that we're going to want to find a way to update or incorporate council. But again, I wanted to put a little bit of context on this, is that it is an aggressive timeline for us. I don't want that to come at the expense of quality, right? I really don't. But at the same time, I want to begin to turn the ship here as quickly as possible, so that we don't get caught up in endless planning, for example. So I'm hoping to establish a plan that allows for input along the way also, Levy. So if we had a plan that incorporated getting community input along the way over the 3-year period as we work to achieve our goals, I think that's one way to approach it too, rather than not finalizing the plan until we've had all the input. Does that make sense? So I want to have a really good, strong framework, but I also want to get it done so we can start taking some action, and then hopefully build into the plan a process for checking ourselves with the community and getting feedback along the way, making it open enough to do that as well. So I know that's a little bit broad, but that's how I'm thinking of this, so that we can, I'm an action-oriented guy, and I really want to be able to, next year, be able to show that we are taking some action on things, but then leave enough room there to make sure that those actions are in line with what the community wants us to do.
Thank you. A couple comments for me. I appreciate learning that you will update the website in September. I guess that's just a couple weeks away. I think that's an important piece for members of the community that want to figure out how to push that feedback, and knowing that we can all have that same area that we could refer people to, that would be really helpful. And I like the creativity with the QR codes and that opportunity at National Night Out inside the communities and talking with them that way. I would hope that we could also look at other ways across the city that we could promote this effort, whether it's, I don't know, through the water bills or through other parts of the organization that could help do some pulling in of information. Sometimes we don't think about the police until we need them. And the more that we can wave that flag that we're looking for that community feedback, I think would be really helpful. And so it was such a value for us when we were working on the independent assessment, and continuing that, I think, is a win-win for all of us. We know that our society can change. And so if we have any cycles through this planning phase, continuing to have that area that folks can land on and have a voice, I think is really key to this work. My initial reaction to that term, 21st century policing, was a little bit, I took pause there. I think that's a law enforcement term. I mean, it is your strategic plan, but it's also that community policing engagement strategic plan in some ways. And I think you might need to explain that a little bit more. I heard you use the word pillar, and it reminded me that is a structure. It's a model that has 6 pillars, if I recall. And I think it's a wonderful model, but it doesn't translate well in the terms of just saying 21st century policing. If there's a way to expound on that as you're delivering that message, just some feedback there. I really want community members to pick up this plan and understand it. And I want to, and you think about the youth, and you think about our seniors, and that broad audience that you have to help understand the plan, I think would be key there. So, but enough for me. I want to look around the room and make sure others have the chance. And I'll just maybe go around the table and start with Cindy.
Yeah, I thought that was a great start. It's extremely robust timeline, which I appreciate that because the audit that we've just been through was the voice of let's make some changes. So I'm glad we're not delaying or dilly-dallying along trying to figure out what we're going to do. So I like the aggressive timeline. I appreciate all the hard work that you guys are doing. I think the safety, legitimacy, and excellence. I love I wrote down legitimacy with a question mark, and then as the presentation moved on, I'm most interested in what you're going to come up in that area. I think that's one of the areas that our community is asking for transparency and knowledge, and why do we do what we do, and how do we do what we do, and can we be involved with a voice to help steer police work or our strength of our community. And so that one's really interesting to me. I can't wait to see what is going to revolve out of that section. And then to echo Jody, I thought the QR code and the surveys, those are all great. Updating the website is great. Water bills, what a great idea. We've all gotten little things in our water bill. Granted, that's a resource, a cost instead of QR codes and stuff like that. That's a little bit cheaper to go around. But the legitimacy thing, I think that's an area where you'll get a lot of feedback.
Thank you, Cindy. Let's see, Scotty.
I'll follow Casey's lead and just listen for a while.
Thank you. I did, you reminded me, I appreciate the non-sworn focus on your internal committee. So thank you for that. Let's see, Kathleen.
Thank you, Jody. I feel like I've lost so many information because of not being able to join in previous meetings, but I've met Chief Womack in another meeting in I think May, or was it June, but I really like the plan that is going. I am more like the way I process things, I have to listen to it, read it through. So I was just wondering if we are able to have access to the PowerPoint for me in order to really give full feedback. And the first thing that came to mind when I heard about the input from community is how are we reaching the community members that, or even the communities that are totally disconnected from the system because of a language barrier, or ones that don't know how to navigate the system. But I'm happy to hear all the things that are happening or are going to be in place moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. Deputy Burke.
Well, I'd say that I really don't have a whole lot of questions just because I'm pretty familiar with the path. I would talk about some of the things and the strategies that we're implementing for our smarter policing side of things, just the data analysis and how we're looking at doing things in a smarter way. I think we've already evolved quite a bit since the start of this project, and we're pretty excited to see where we take it next. So we'll continue to see it grow, and I really don't have any questions for the plan.
Thank you. Oni, did we just lose Oni? Shoot. Let's see if she comes back in and make sure she has the opportunity. And anyone else that didn't get a chance that would like to comment? Casey, I see you unmute.
Very sharp. Yes, so I don't have any questions, and I guess I wanted to make sure that folks with questions did get a chance to go first. Since this is also draft, my feedback is really process related because audits are what I do, assessments are what I do. The state is actually looking at something similar at a statewide level that I'm not going to talk about, but when I look at this and any audit or assessment follow-up discussion, I look for three things. And one is, are we identifying each recommendation from whatever the report was, and we're working on a specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely goals that associate with each one of those things. And you walked us through how you're doing that, and you're cross-referencing those, and I think that's great. And so 2, are we identifying the responsible owners for each of those steps? And again, the lieutenant talked us through how that's happening right now. And again, it's in draft, so I don't really have any questions or a lot of feedback, but it's good to know that that's happening. And then 3, are we setting up milestone discussions to check in along the way? And I know the chief has talked about how we'll continue to do that. And I'd like if we could establish, I don't want to say set in stone, but at least establish estimates on when those future meetings might occur with this group, similar to how we did when the assessment was ongoing, so that if we meet again, let's say in November, before the holidays, and then maybe in February, whatever the days look like. That way it would be good for all of us to make sure that we can be able to get back together. I know we have a few folks that are missing, and that feedback would be great. And there's so many smart people in this room with so many varying degrees of experience and just differential experience that I think getting that would be really useful. Especially as the draft coalesces more around actual, measurable metrics and things like that. And I really look forward to it. So appreciate the update and look forward to seeing more as it comes together.
Thank you, Casey. Others? Yeah, thank you to the city for thinking about the group. We were well attended. I actually think we just are missing one tonight. And I think it's fair to say this group is very interested and would be available to meet again for that update. As we've talked along the way, time and moving it forward is really important and key. And so thank you for compressing that timeline to make this happen. So very good work. Before if we transition to another topic, I just wanted to touch in on budget, and thank you for that slide at the end, Hillary, to talk with us about the body worn cameras and adding staff. Do you have a plan that includes when that might kick off or how that looks? Just, I know that that's an important topic for a lot of folks. Anyone?
Specifically, you're asking about the body worn camera?
Yes.
Yeah. So we are in the process of getting one of those staff hired that's going to actually be very integral in the process of getting the RFP, and we still have to go out to bid and all that. So we're still pretty early, but it's moving along. And I don't know if the chief or Lieutenant Aguilar has any more to add on that.
I'll just say we're doing a lot of internal work and prep too, like looking at policies and gathering information and preparing for that. A lot of it applies to, there's going to be a lot of information about public records requests or how it applies to evidence in criminal cases. So there's a lot of groundwork that needs to be done too, that we kind of need to iron out before we even look at the different vendors to select from, so we know what we need from those vendors. So there's just been a lot of that internal prep work going on.
Great. Anybody else have questions about budget? It's great to hear about community engagement lieutenant and how we can imagine how that will come together. So that's great. Any other questions on budget? Okay, great. Chief, anything? I'll let you have some closing words then.
I just really appreciate everyone's time and continued interest as we move along. And the input was very good tonight. So we'll take all that in too and apply it. So I like the idea Casey had too of checking in again, establishing kind of a rough timeline for that is a good idea. So we can follow up on that and we'll just keep working through the process. I'm excited too about moving on with legitimacy and some of the other, a lot of that as we go through the findings in the audit, many of them fit in certain categories. And I think there's a lot of room, there's a lot of open space in the legitimacy area to kind of come up with our own ideas and thoughts, not just purely from the assessment. And that's what I'm looking forward to also. So I'll be happy to share those with you as we go. Don't hesitate to provide other feedback if you think of things along the way. And most of you probably have my email address or through Courtney, or just provide feedback along the way as you hear things or think of things so that we can incorporate it as we go also. But I just real thankful for everybody's time and appreciate your feedback tonight.
Thank you, and thank you to the city staff. Would you please let us know when you do launch the website and information sharing? It sounds like it would be okay if we got a copy of the draft or the presentation that you gave us tonight. So we'll see that as follow-up, and we'll see some more follow-up from scheduling on perhaps opportunities for us to get together again. So good work. Thank you for all you're doing.
Good. Thank all of you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.